Hey guys, it's Dana. Today we're gonna make something I learned to sew long ago. It's an oldie but goodie and something I keep coming back to. We're gonna make cute little fabric bows. Making bows is really fun and it's a great beginner project. It doesn't take a lot of fabric and it comes together quickly. And you can use them to accessorize all aspects of your life, right? They're really cute in your hair, of course, for yourself or your daughter or your granddaughter, or gifts for friends. You can sew one on a bag like I did here, for my daughter's dance bag. Or you can put them on shirts and dresses. Here's a version I made out of knit fabric for my daughter's little tank top. And you know, back in the 80s, my sisters and I used to make these by the dozen, and then we sold them to all our friends in middle school, along with scrunchies and other great relics from the 80s. But today we're gonna give these kind of an updated look. We're gonna use some silky fabrics that will give your bows a slightly softer look and give them a good floppy factor, like the one I've sewn here. In fact, really thin, silky fabrics are what give it that really floppy look, or I guess in sewing terms would be good drape. But you know, we'll go with flop. But first, let's talk about silky fabrics. Silky fabrics today don't typically have real silk in them. They're usually made from synthetic fibers, which still gives it that drapey, slinky look that we love from silk fabrics. And the kind I like using for these bows is a silky chiffon fabric. If you want to learn more about silk fabrics, I have an entire section in my book, Fabrics A to Z, and there's pages and pages of every type of fabric and how to use them. As I said, today we're going to use silky chiffon. Now, there's some bad news about sewing with silky fabrics. They're totally a pain in the butt. They are. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Every time I sew with them, I think, oh, why am I sewing with this fabric? It's moving everywhere and it's not cutting as straight as I want. And then I create this really beautiful dress or shirt or bow and it's like, oh, and you forget and so you sew with it again and then you're like, ugh. It's kind of like having kids. But I promise, if you give it a try and just work with it and have a little patience, you'll find out that you really love sewing with it. Now, if you're a beginner, you can definitely make these bows from some cotton fabric, some quilting cotton, something like that. But let's try out silk. Okay, I've got my cutting mat, my ruler, and my rotary cutter. Those are the best tools for cutting straight lines in fabric. Now you can make your bow any dimension that you want. I personally don't like mine huge or ginormous. So some good dimensions that I use are 7 by 11. 7-11, easy to remember. Okay, the best way to cut this that I have found is to first just cut a large section out and then cut with my rotary cutter. Okay, set this aside. Okay, so take your fabric. First I'm gonna cut the 7 inches. Right there, lay my rotary cutter down. And you really wanna press hard with your hand here so that it keeps it in place. Cut down, and even though this fabric is so thin, sometimes it kind of just, there we go, that's a clean cut. Sometimes it gets stuck under there and doesn't always work as I want it to. Reason number 1 that you're not gonna like silk. Just kidding, you're gonna love it. Just preparing you, okay? Okay, now let's do 11 inches here. Okay, now we have the big part of our bow. We want to cut a little centerpiece, which you want to cut 1.5 by 3 inches. And again, you can make that any length you want, but I kind of think that a skinnier center looks a little bit better. So I'm doing this 1.5 inches. There we go. Okay. Let's move on. Now grab your iron, and first we want to press those edges of the centerpiece under, about 1/2 inch. And just do your best. And you want to do this on both sides. And when you're working with silks, it's important to do a little test first with your iron because some silks made from synthetic fibers can kind of melt a little bit at different temperatures. And especially if your silk fabric has something like this little metallic pineapple, that might get kind of melted on your iron. So something you can do with fabrics like that is to use a press cloth or just another piece of fabric. I have a cotton piece of fabric right here. Place it over the top and you can just do a lighter press like that. Okay, we are ready to sew. Okay, I'm threading my machine with a white thread because you don't want something that's gonna really contrast or stand out. The thread will be hidden, but if you have a dark thread, you might see it. Okay, and then as always, I love my little threading function on this baby lock. Goes right through for me. Okay, I've got my fabric here. You wanna fold it in half lengthwise like this with right sides of the fabric touching each other. And then another thing with silky fabrics is that you don't want to pin into the fabric sometimes. It might damage it or leave a hole. So instead, you can pin right in the seam area. That way, if it does leave holes, you won't see it because you will sew next to that. Okay, I'm just gonna pin it in a couple spots just to keep it together. As you can tell, it's kind of slinky and moving around a little bit on me. If you were using cotton fabric, you probably wouldn't have to pin it like this. Okay, go to your machine and do a little back stitch. And then I'm sewing with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you find that you're going too quickly, you can always adjust your speed control here. There we go, that's a little better for me. And just sew straight down. Don't worry if your line is not perfectly straight. It's still gonna look great. Do a back stitch at the end, cut your threads. Love my cutting feature. Turn the thing right side out. Just like this. Okay, now you can see I have this seam right in the middle here. That's now the wrong side of our fabric, okay? So turn it to the right side, fold it in half so right sides are touching. And now we're gonna sew right along this other edge. I'm gonna pin those together again. Okay. Come to your machine. Same seam allowance, just sew straight down. Forward and back stitch at the beginning, forward and back stitch at the end. And then I like to trim off all these loose ends here because it definitely will start fraying on you. Unless you can find non-fray chiffon. That's kind of a fun fabric to work with. Okay, and trim off any little threads that might be there because those might poke out of your bow. Okay, now we're ready to put our centerpiece on. Turn it back, right side out. Grab your little centerpiece. Now, depending on how large your bow is, depends how many little folds and gathers you can put in it. This one can probably do like once or twice. If you made one a little bit larger, say 9 by 13, you could get a few more of those folds in there. Just like that, place your centerpiece over, fold it around, kind of pull it tight. As you can see, this is kind of, there we go. Make sure everything is in its place. Okay, and you can always make adjustments later, but you can tell there it looks pretty good. Then we're gonna go back to our machine. I'm not pinning this time, I'm just kind of holding it real tight there. And then what you wanna do is shift your needle over to the left so that it can get really tight next to that fabric. Okay, do a forward and back stitch. And then just sew right down. Forward and back stitch. Cut your threads. Now let's just cut off this little tail right here. And trim off any extra threads that you see. And then you can make any kind of little adjustments. Okay, let's just kind of fix it a little bit. Oh, that looks really cute. Now the final thing we want to do is to press the bow one more time with our iron. Take your iron and just press right on top of that bow one more time. And this will help get those edges nice and flat. And I think it gives it kind of a, I don't know, vintagey vibe, especially if you do it with cotton fabrics because they can get nice and flat. Just press right on top and all those gathers just get, well, kind of flat. I'm telling you, pressing is key to professional looking stuff. Very cool. Okay, the last thing you want to do is to add a little clip to the back. You can use an alligator clip like this, or a safety pin if you wanted to attach it to your shirt or to a bag. You could even sew it onto those things as well, or you could hot glue gun it. And then it's all ready to go in your hair. Now I know you're gonna wanna make more and more and more and more. You might even try selling them. For more ideas and tutorials, visit my website, madeeveryday.com. And for more information on sewing machines, go to babylock.com where it's all for the love of sewing. I'll see you next time.